Joining me now is Liberal Senator for Victoria, James Paterson. James, thank you very much for your time tonight. I want to ask you about the independents here. Their main aim is to defeat the Morrison government. There's no question about it. As Paul Kelly says, it's their very reason for being. Is it therefore deceptive of them to use the brand independent?
Look, that's exactly right, SHARRI. I suspect most of your viewers understand the risks of voting Labor. They understand that Anthony Albanese has never held an economic portfolio, he's never handed down a budget, he has no economic plan. They understand he's never held a national security portfolio, that he has no interest in national security. But it's really important that they also understand the risks of voting independent, particularly at this election and particularly at this time. Because voting independent is voting for a weaker Australia at the very time we need Australia to be as strong as possible, because we're facing the most uncertain strategic environment since World War II. And the really scary thing is, SHARRI, today Adam Bandt, the Greens leader, said in his view, Anthony Albanese cannot win the election outright and will be reliant on the Greens and crossbench independents to form government after this election. So the risk that Australia faces is a weak Labor government in power with the Greens and the independents, whose views on major issues facing Australia, whether it's tax policy or the economy or national security and defence, really haven't been examined at all.
James, what's your view on this anti-Israel position that I've just explained in the editorial that has been taken either by some of the independents or crucial members of their team? You know, why does this matter?
It's really very concerning, SHARRI, frankly, for any aspirant to the federal parliament to be associated with people who have these views, to have made the choice to associate themselves with people who have these views. But it's particularly concerning in seats that have very high Jewish community populations, who would hope that their future federal MP, whoever that might be, would be sensitive to and understand their issues. And particularly at a time where we've seen rising anti-Semitism, not just around the world, but sadly, yes, here too in Australia. We've seen measures of anti-Semitism produced by the Executive Council of Australian Jewry and other groups demonstrate year after year after year it's increasing. And unfortunately, one of the reasons it's increasing is because of the inappropriate public comments and rhetoric of political leaders. And for Zoe Daniel and Allegra Spender to be made aware of the comments of people associated with their campaign and then make no effort at all to distance themselves from their campaigners, from no effort at all to punish them for what they've said and to endorse them, I think reflects very poorly on them, because leadership requires more than that. Leadership requires zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. Leadership requires standing up, and I think they've failed that test.
Yeah, imagine if one of the Prime Minister or any minister's senior operations manager said not just a Jewish advocacy group, but any advocacy group could shut up, and yet the response from Zoe Daniel was, "I stand by my team." James, it's one thing I've noticed is that there seems to be a lot of support from ABC figures or former ABC figures, prominent ABC figures, for these independents. Of course, Zoe Daniel herself used to work at the ABC, but Quinton Dempster, Kerry O'Brien, Emma Alberici all came out for Allegra Spender this week. What does this say about the far-left nature of the public broadcaster?
Oh, SHARRI, like you, I'm always very surprised when someone from the ABC retires and then reveals their true colours. It was always such a mystery when they're working at the ABC. But more seriously, yeah, no, not a shock at all. But more seriously, SHARRI, I mean, the ABC is not on the ballot. That's a problem for another day. Who are on the ballot are these independents. And just imagine if over the last 3 years, if some of these independents had been in power, and when Josh Frydenberg was devising JobKeeper, he had to sit down and negotiate it with Allegra Spender. Imagine if, when the Prime Minister formed AUKUS with Joe Biden and Boris Johnson, that he had to sit down and negotiate that with Zoe Daniel. I mean, this is why I say a vote for independence is a vote for a weaker Australia, because the last thing we need as a country right now is a minority government. We're navigating the most dangerous strategic environment in a generation, and we're only going to get through that by taking the tough decisions we need in the national interest to make our country as strong as possible. And are these independents forcing a government into minority going to make us strong, or are they going to make us weak? I think the answer is very clear.
Yeah. How much of a threat are these independents to the government this election? I mean, my understanding is that the one seat that the government is concerned about losing to an independent is Trent Zimmerman's in North Sydney. Are there others that you think could fall?
We don't take any of our seats for granted, SHARRI. All of our members, whether it's Dave Sharma or Tim Wilson or Josh Frydenberg or Trent Zimmerman or Jason Falinski, they all work incredibly hard on delivering for their communities and on offering their communities a real choice for the future. You know, elections have consequences, and if you re-elect those people who worked very hard over the last 3 years to deliver the economic recovery that we've already seen post-COVID, then you know what you're getting. You know you're going to get our strong economic plan, which is going to reduce unemployment potentially to the lowest levels ever seen in records. But you're taking a massive risk with these people.
Now, obviously, the Prime Minister today called the election, and this campaign does come at an uncertain time in the world. We have Russia's war in Ukraine, we have threats from China in the Solomon Islands. The pandemic is still lingering. How much do you think national security will be an issue that will influence how people vote? And of course, I ask this to you in your capacity as chair of the Joint Parliamentary Intelligence Committee.
SHARRI, I think it's going to have the biggest impact on the federal election since the 2001 election, which was obviously held in the shadow of September 11, and that was a very strong national security themed election. And the reason why it'll be a big factor in this election is because we do face a rising power in China in our own region that is getting increasingly aggressive in its rhetoric and its approach to the region, whether you look at Hong Kong or the South China Sea or indeed events in the Solomons. And the next government after this election will face some really big choices. One of the choices that they'll have to make is what sort of nuclear-propelled submarine we go for. Will we go for the American-designed Virginia class or the British-designed Astute class or some combination thereof? Now, I'd love to see some of these independents on your show, SHARRI, explain their views about which submarine we should choose, about their views about AUKUS and national security. Because if they are holding the balance of power after the election, as Adam Bandt hopes to, if they are working with the Greens of a policy of halving our defence spending and a weak Labor government, just imagine the dangerous circumstances that puts our country in. I mean, there's never been a more important time to have a strong majority government that has a clear plan on national security and defence, and that is at stake. And I hope voters appreciate those risks.
Yeah, well, given that some of the independents might be part of or might hold a balance of power in a hung parliament, I think we do need to know their views beyond climate change, which is the policy platform they're running on. So, like you, I hope they agree to come on this program. I'm not sure that any of them would have the courage to do so after my reporting in The Australian over the past week, but we will see. We've got a 6-week campaign, so we'll try. James Paterson, thank you very much for your time this evening.